The Department of Homeland Security is the third largest department of the U.S. government with 230,000 employees, 22 agencies, that was formed in 2002. It is the newest cabinet-level department of our government with a load of missions: counterterrorism, border security, aviation security, maritime security, cyber security, port security, maritime security through the Coast Guard, protection of our national leaders through the Secret Service, enforcement and administration of our immigration laws, response to natural disasters through FEMA. There are 22 different agencies within the Department of Homeland Security with a $60 billion budget, 22 agencies, 230,000 people. Now, who here, I will tell you that I was a Senate-confirmed presidential appointee, appointed by the President, confirmed by the Senate in December 2013. And in the presidential line of succession. Now, everybody here knows what the presidential line of succession is, right? Something happens to the president, the vice president becomes the president. Something happens to the president and the vice president, somebody else becomes president in our democracy, right? Okay, everybody's nodding their head yes. Now, who here thinks they know the presidential line of succession? I see a lot of hands going up right away. All right. Gentleman right here, stand up, please. Please stand up. You don't have a mic, so make sure all of your classmates, students hear you. Tell me your name. Nicholas. What is the presidential line of succession? Speaker of the House. Okay. Close, but not quite. Do you want to take another stab at it? Nicholas, you were the first one with your hand up, all right? Now, one of the morals of this story, one of the morals of my lesson here this afternoon is that 70% of life, maybe 80% of life, is raising your hand. You don't get anywhere unless you raise your hand and volunteer for the task. Nicholas was the first one to raise his hand. So, Nicholas, you get a notepad page, all right? All right. Now, so you said President, Vice President, Speaker, then no. Who here knows teachers, faculty, adults, stand down, okay? Who here knows who comes after the Speaker of the House? Yes, sir, right here.
The President Pro Tempore.
Oh, my goodness. Tell me your name.
Andrew.
Andrew, President Pro Tem of the Senate. All right, Andrew. I have a feeling you know what comes after that, right?
Secretary of State.
Oh, my goodness. Secretary of State. Are you a government major? You're bound for law school, aren't you? All right. Secretary of State, and then the rest of the cabinet, right? In the order of what, Andrew?
Secretary of Defense next.
Well, but how does that order work? You don't have to list every cabinet officer for me, but how does it work? The order in which the department was created. This man is cooking with gas. Thank you. Whoa. All right. So, what does that mean insofar as where I was in the line of succession? Last. Dead last. There was nobody behind me, Andrew. Nobody. Except maybe the U.S. Army. There was nobody behind me. Before I got into office, I thought that it was cabinet, deputy secretaries, undersecretaries, assistant secretaries. It would just keep going and going and going. But I was the last one. Now, anybody here know what a designated survivor is? Oh, a lot of hands. All right. There's a TV show called Designated Survivor, right? Okay. Young man right here, please stand up. Tell me your name. Nathaniel, what is the designated survivor?
During major government functions like State of the Union address, one cabinet member is dedicated to remain in court just in case there's an accident.
Exactly. So in case you didn't hear it, what Nathaniel said was, in any major government event like an inauguration or State of the Union address, when everybody is together in one room, somebody in the line of succession has to absent themselves in case of catastrophe. That's what happened in the TV show, Designated Survivor. So, I was your designated survivor twice. I drew this duty twice. I got the short straw twice. State of the Union 2016, I had to go to the undisclosed location, which I'm not allowed to talk about, other than the fact that I was able to take the White House chef with me, which is pretty cool. But then I got it again, the second time, on Inauguration Day, which meant that I had to withdraw my resignation letter for noon when Donald Trump took over and resubmit a new resignation letter to say that I will serve in the job until my successor, John Kelly, was appointed and confirmed by the Senate. So that meant that I was the designated survivor into the Trump administration, which means I'd make a great trivia question. Who was Donald Trump's first cabinet officer? Me. For 7.5 hours, I was the entirety of Donald Trump's cabinet. And at exactly 7:32 on Friday night, my undisclosed location was my house. I can tell you that, for this one. My house in Montclair, New Jersey. Anybody here from Montclair, New Jersey? All right. What street do you live on? All right. I am a Montclair, New Jersey resident. And for 7.5 hours, by the way, I'm sorry if my motorcade ever cut off your parents when they were parking. I was in Donald Trump's cabinet. I was a designated survivor, and in an instant, I went from being secretary, this doesn't happen to too many people, Secretary of Homeland Security, fourth in line for the presidency, with a lot of Secret Service and military surrounding me, to a private citizen with, with nothing. Now, there's a whole, it may comfort you to know that there is a whole continuity of government plan whenever there's a designated survivor. There is a shadow Secretary of State, shadow Secretary of Defense. Everybody has a line of succession, and everybody knows who everybody is when there's a designated survivor. The one thing they didn't think about when President Obama and President Trump tasked me to be the designated survivor is if I had become president on Inauguration Day, it would have been the result of my own massive failure to secure the inauguration. Didn't think about that. And by the way, no presidency with the name Johnson begins well. Right? Think about that too. Right, Andrew? Right. Andrew Johnson, Lyndon Johnson, right? There's no president named Jay Johnson. So, okay. Now, a lot of people ask, why did we create this massive bureaucracy called the Department of Homeland Security to secure the homeland in 2002? Why did we create this large agency? Isn't it too big? And it is kind of big. Here's the basic org chart. Within the Department of Homeland Security, can everybody see that? It's a little light in here. Can those in the back see that? Within the Department of Homeland Security, you've got, thank you, you've got an intelligence agency, intelligence and analysis. You've got National Protection and Programs, which is basically protection of federal office buildings and cybersecurity. You've got a Science and Technology Directorate. You've got an office responsible for the detection of domestic nuclear threats, chemical, biological threats. You've got an Office of Health Affairs. You've got the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Brunswick, Georgia. Then you've got these big operational components, which a lot of people are familiar with. Customs and Border Protection, the men and women in green on the border, the customs officers in blue, the blue uniforms that you see at the airports when you come back into the country. Immigration Customs Enforcement, Citizenship and Immigration Services, Naturalization, Refugee Resettlement, which we'll talk about more in a moment. The United States Coast Guard, TSA, everybody knows about TSA. TSA is the agency of government that the American public most interacts with, except maybe on April 15th when you file your taxes. The Secret Service, everybody knows about. Everybody's fascinated with the Secret Service. More about that later. And then FEMA, response to natural disasters, hurricanes, floods, mudslides, tornadoes, earthquakes, and the like. Now, all of these different missions before 2002 were scattered all across the federal government in all of these different agencies. I'd like to point this out. Hence, the creation of this large bureaucracy under one cabinet officer, the Secretary of Homeland Security, makes a lot of sense. Putting it all in one place with the overall responsibility of Homeland Security, border security, aviation security, maritime security, port security, and the like. Now, the principal mission, the reason it was created after 9/11 was counterterrorism, to help with the counterterrorism effort, along with the U.S. military, our federal law enforcement, our local enforcement. But everyone needs to know that the terrorist threat to our country, the counterterrorism mission, has evolved significantly since 9/11. Right after 9/11, when Congress created the Department of Homeland Security, the thinking then was that terrorism was something that would infiltrate our borders, that would come from outside the country and infiltrate our borders. Therefore, let's put in one cabinet-level department border security, aviation security, port security, maritime security, all in one place, because terrorism is something that would infiltrate our borders. The threat now has evolved from the large-scale style attack like 9/11, which is what we refer to as a terrorist-directed attack, where someone like Osama bin Laden directs some operatives to come into the country, plot, train, and then carry out a large-scale attack, to more modern-day, smaller-scale attacks of the type that we refer to as terrorist-inspired attacks, where a so-called lone wolf, a single operative, maybe one or two people who have never been part of Al-Qaeda or ISIS and trained with them, never been overseas to meet the leader of the terrorist organization, but who carries out an attack, whether it's by gun, by vehicle, by pressure cooker bomb, here in our homeland, inspired, not directed, but inspired by something they see on the internet. And so lots of people like to ask the Secretary of Homeland Security, what kept you up at night? I will tell you, it was the next Boston Marathon, or the next San Bernardino, or the next Orlando, Florida, or the next West Side Highway attack, like the one that occurred on Halloween afternoon. These types of attacks, this type of threat, is much harder to detect, frankly. I will tell you that our government, our intelligence community, is now much better at detecting this type of large-scale attack. We are much better at detecting from overseas plotting against our homeland, to the point where we can interdict it at a very early stage. This, because it is carried out by the lone actor, is much more difficult to detect and makes for a more complicated homeland security threat environment. But this is the environment in which we live. So while I was in office, to deal with this specific type of threat, there were two things in particular that we focused on. First was this: public engagement, public awareness, public vigilance. If you see something, say something. This is more than a slogan. Reinforcing this with the public has actually prevented terrorist attacks. Raising awareness among the public that the public has a role too in counterterrorism makes a difference. For example, West 27th Street last week, some of you may remember, this individual left a bunch of pressure cooker bombs on West 23rd, West 27th Street. The West 27th Street bomb, before it could go off, was discovered by a woman who remembered this slogan and phoned it in. And the police were able to get to the device before it was able to detonate. So we amplified, while I was secretary, this message. We dusted it off and spruced it up, gave it a new logo. We entered into partnerships with the NFL, Major League Baseball, state and local government, all sorts of private organizations to promote this message. This is the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. And we need to do more of this. Likewise, community engagement. While I was secretary in 3 years, I think I traveled to every major metropolitan area in this country that had a significant American Muslim population, because the Muslim communities in this country are the communities that ISIS and AQ seeks to target for recruitment for terrorist-directed attacks. And so, in the judgment of a lot of us, building bridges with these communities to basically say, help us help you combat efforts to recruit within your communities. And so we spent a lot of time doing this as well. And every time I'd go to one of these engagements, whether it was Columbus, Ohio, or Boston, I'd bring the local police or the feds, the FBI, with me. Okay, aviation security. Everybody knows about aviation security. If you've ever flown on a commercial flight, you've had a chance to say hello to TSA. As I said, this is the agency of government that interacts with the public the most. You would be amazed at the number of handguns TSA on a daily basis discovers in carry-on luggage. Loaded, 85% of which are loaded. The excuses vary from, I forgot it was in there, or, gee, I didn't know I couldn't bring my gun on the plane. You'd be amazed. We're seizing record numbers of handguns by TSA every day at airports. And so the next time you see a TSO when you're traveling someplace, you might want to say thank you. They've got a difficult job. Okay, cybersecurity. I like to say when I came into office that counterterrorism was the cornerstone mission of the Department of Homeland Security. Cybersecurity is the other cornerstone. Cybersecurity is a big mission. In my private life now as a lawyer, everyone wants to know about cybersecurity. This is ongoing warfare. It's a complex thing. Many of you, I hope, when you finish Regis, you go to college, maybe you go to grad school, you'll think about going into cybersecurity. This is the growth area. This is, frankly, the #1 threat to our nation. Cyber attacks from a range of actors, nation states, criminals, hacktivists, those who engage in ransomware. Those who know what ransomware is, raise your hand. Okay, ransomware. Everybody knows what ransomware is. This is the growth industry, cybersecurity. Immigration and border security was a mission of the Department of Homeland Security. I have to tell you that of all of the issues I worked on when I was general counsel of the Department of Defense, targeted lethal killing, drones, gays in the military, Guantanamo Bay, immigration was the most difficult, most emotional, most politicized issue. There's a lot of misinformation around immigration. Ask many people, and they will tell you their perception is that our southern border has more illegal migration crossing it over the last 5 years than in history, when the exact opposite is true. First of all, we now have more Border Patrol agents, more surveillance, more technology on our southern border with Mexico than we've ever had because of a 10, 15-year investment that our government has made. We actually do have a wall. There already is a wall on the southern border. I bet you didn't know that. There's a wall in the places where it makes sense to build a wall. We have 700 miles of wall pursuant to the Secure Fence Act that Congress passed in 2006. The southern border consists of desert, it consists of urban area, but it also consists of mountains, And it also consists of the Rio Grande, which is this windy river in South Texas. Guess what? We have 700 miles across 1,900 miles of the border that has a wall. We don't have a wall in the Rio Grande. You cannot build a wall in the middle of a windy river. And if you tried, you'd waste billions of dollars of taxpayer money. And you'd spend the rest of your life in what we refer to as condemnation proceedings, lawsuits where we try to take people's private property away from them. But we actually do already have a wall. And it has led, all of this investment has led to this, what you see here. This is illegal migration over the last 16, 17 years. The high in apprehensions on our southern border was 17 years ago, FY 2000, where we had 1.6 million apprehensions. And you can see in more recent years, it is a fraction of what it used to be. And apprehensions are an indicator of total attempts to cross our southern border. So you can see on this chart, the low was fiscal year 2011, 6 years ago. The second lowest was FY15, my second year in office, 331,000. Now, a lot of this is due to several different factors. One, the investments we have in fact made in our border security on the southern border, but the changing character of illegal migration. It's no longer single adults from Mexico. The economy of Mexico has improved. There are push and pull factors when it comes to illegal migration. Factors that push someone to leave their country and want to come to the United States, and pull factors that attract them to the United States. I will tell you that the push factors are always more powerful. And so when the economy in Mexico improved, illegal migration went down. I mentioned there's a changing character of illegal migration. In fiscal year 14, you'll see the high of 479. It spiked because we had women, children from Central America. This is the new migration on our southern border. Unaccompanied children who are literally sent here by their parents in Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, because the conditions in those countries are so bad that they have no choice but to send their son into the hands of a smuggler, give him a strip of paper with a cell number on it, to try to get to our southern border. And then once they're here, they call their aunt, their grandparent, their father, because they're so desperate to leave Central America. And I spent hours with these kids asking them, why did you come here? And they all tell me basically the same story. The gangs were going to kill me in Central America. So this is the new migration that we face on our southern border. We have to enforce our laws, but we should do so with compassion. But the reality is that illegal migration has gone down significantly on our southern border in the last 17 years. Likewise, the number of undocumented immigrants in our country has stopped growing. It's leveled off, as reflected on this chart right here. The high was somewhere around 2007, 2008, where it was 12.2 million, and you can see it has leveled off. It has stopped growing. There's a lot of misapprehension about illegal immigration in this country. Very emotional topic, but these are the facts. Another mission of the Department of Homeland Security, along with the State Department, and this is an aspect of immigration, is refugee resettlement. We have a worldwide refugee crisis in our country, in our world. Millions of refugees leaving places like Iraq and Syria, who go to Western Europe, who are desperate for a better life, fleeing terrorism and violence in places like Iraq and Syria. And so the United States has stepped up to do its part, or at least we did in the Obama administration. And so refugee resettlement, coming to this country as a refugee, is the most thoroughly vetted way to come to our country. State Department vetting, customs vetting, it takes 12 to 18 months to get here as a refugee. Once you're a refugee, you get a work authorization, You have a path to citizenship. And I met a number of refugees. This gentleman, Kamal, in Houston, Texas, a Syrian refugee. He came here from Syria. He was in military detention. This man had his kidney forcibly removed by the Syrian regime. I remember he told me, my regime tortured me. And I said to him, well, I'm your regime now. No one's going to torture you here. So it was a great moment. Then there's this little boy here. I'll never forget this young man. This is Jafar, 9 years old. I met him in Turkey last year. I walked into a processing center in Turkey, and I did what I typically do when I go into an immigration center or a holding center. I went into where all the kids were. None of them speak English. And I said, does anybody here speak English and wants to talk to the Secretary of Homeland Security? And this little boy piped right up. He's an Iraqi refugee. Spoke perfect King's English. Perfect. And it was apparent to me that this kid was like a boy genius. And he was there with his mother and his two sisters, desperate to come to the United States. So I said to him, let's take this picture. We'll print it out, and you keep it in your back pocket. And you show the interviewer that you met me, because they won't believe that you met me. And he did that. He kept the picture and was resettled in our country just 3 months later. We made it into a video on Worldwide Refugee Day last year. I'm Jay Johnson, the Secretary of Homeland Security. There's a worldwide refugee crisis right now. Literally millions of men, women, and children fleeing violence and terrorism in places like Syria and Iraq. The United States must do its part to share the burden of this worldwide crisis and resettle refugees in our country, consistent with our Homeland Security and consistent with who we are as a great and humanitarian nation, a nation of immigrant heritage. A few months ago, when I was in Turkey, I met hundreds of refugees. One of those refugees was a 9-year-old boy named Jafar. Jafar spoke perfect English. I asked him, where'd you learn your English? He told me from watching TV. Jafar also told me that he wanted to come to the United States with his family. I told Jafar, I hope you make it to the United States. Jafar?
Yeah.
Welcome to the United States. What do you think so far?
It's great. I really love it.
Well, welcome to our country. And try not to watch too much TV, okay?
Okay.
All right. Throughout our history, refugees have added to the fabric and strength of our nation. People like our former Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, or Albert Einstein and Elie Wiesel, 2 Jews displaced by Nazi Germany, or athletes like Nadia Comaneci or Lowell Deng, who fled communism and the Sudanese Civil War. Perhaps Jafar will grow up to be a brilliant scientist or public servant one day. What we do know is that for Jafar and his family, the future is brighter now that they live in our great country of freedom and opportunity. This is the United States of America. For us, taking in refugees at times of crisis is the right thing to do. We can and we will continue to ensure our own safety while doing our share to welcome men, women, and children who are fleeing terrorism and violence. We can and we must do both. Today, on World Refugee Day, let's rededicate ourselves to this mission. I have a career in filmmaking. That film was all my idea. I take credit for it. Anyway, Jafar and his family live in Michigan. I'm convinced he's going to be at MIT in 10 years. Anyway, the Secret Service is part of Homeland Security. Everybody knows about the Secret Service. Everybody's fascinated with the Secret Service. Okay, let's go back to the quiz. All right, this is a two-page quiz. Let's see what we got here. We've got one more sheet of stationery from the Secretary of Homeland Security, and then we've got one better. We've got stationery from the United States State Department. Okay? Now, whoever gets the next one right gets these 2 sheets of paper. Okay. Now, here's the question. Are we ready for the question? Got a lot of smart students in this room here. The question is, who does the United States Secret Service protect? The United States Secret Service was formed in 1865, ironically by Abraham Lincoln, just before he was assassinated. It was originally a bank fraud, a bank crime agency, bank robberies, financial crimes. The first time I ever worked with the Secret Service, in 1989, when I was a federal prosecutor, it was a counterfeit currency case. In 1901, not until 1901, 40 years later, with the assassination of William McKinley, did the Secret Service take on the protection mission. And so today, the Secret Service has a dual mission: protection and law enforcement, financial crime, cybersecurity, bank fraud. Okay, who does the Secret Service protect? Who here thinks they know? All right, I'm going to go to the back here for the first time. Okay. Young man here with the green shirt. Uh-oh. Tell me your name. Thomas. Who does the Secret Service protect?
President, former presidents,
President, former presidents. Who else? So far, so good.
people on the campaign trail. They started protecting.
People on the campaign trail.
They started protecting
Anybody in particular on the campaign trail?
presidential candidates.
Presidential candidates. All presidential candidates?
I'm not sure about all of them, but they started protecting Barack Obama.
Right. And guess who wait, don't, you're not done. Guess who has to decide who among the presidential candidates gets Secret Service protection? The Secretary of Homeland Security. Right. Very good, Thomas. Okay. Now, wait, you're not done. You're not done. Who else does the Secret Service protect? So far, so good, Thomas. Keep going. Who else? That's it? Presidents, former presidents, presidential candidates, that's it? There's more, right? Diplomats. Can you be more specific? Diplomats. Every diplomat? Every ambassador who's in this country? Every ambassador from some small state? Probably not. Okay. So who else does the Secret Service protect, Thomas? You're on the right track here. We're on the right track. Let's continue to work together here. Who else? Not sure. All right. Well, Thomas, you got us to about the 40-yard line. Okay. So you get one of these. All right. Now we got this nifty State Department stationery here. Okay. Who wants to give this one a shot? Okay. You're Andrew, right? Andrew, you're too smart. Okay. Okay. We'll come back to you, Andrew. We'll come back to you. Okay. Yes, sir. Right here. Oh, members of Congress? Every single member of the House of Representatives, do you think gets Secret Service protection? Do they deserve Secret Service protection? That's a better question. Okay. All right. Who here thinks they know the answer to this question? Who knows the answer to this question? We've heard president, former presidents, presidential candidates. We heard diplomats, which I think probably needs a little bit more refining. Young man right here. Tell me your name. Michael, you're wrong. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Young man right here. Tell us your name. Jack. First family. Yes. Keep going, Jack. You're talking about congressional leaders, right? Right, Jack? Like the Speaker, the Senate Majority Leader, you're talking about those folks, right? Might that be the Capitol Police? Right, Jack? That's the Capitol Police, right? It's called a leading question, Jack, okay? You can agree to be led, okay? That's the Capitol Police, right, Jack? Okay, who else does the Secret Service protect? You want this nice, you want to bring home tonight to your mom and dad this nice piece of stationery, right? Who else? I'll let you hold it. You said first family. That's good. That means, that includes first lady, right? Do the first ladies get protection after their husbands leave the office? Yes, very good. Okay, you keep going. So former first ladies, right? First family. Who else? How about, there's a position that begins with the letter V. Position that begins with the letter V. The vice president. The vice president. Right, Jack. The vice president is protected by the Secret Service. Keep going. Keep going. The Supreme Court. Well, that's interesting. You know the Supreme Court has the federal marshals, right? They have guns. Might the Supreme Court be protected by the federal marshals? Yes. Okay, very good, Jack. Okay, keep going, keep going. Who else? Okay, all right. Jack, you got us to the 70-yard line, okay? So you get the stationery from the State Department. Now, Gabriel, I got this next one here, this next one off the notepad. This comes from a very special place here in New York City. Gabe, what is that?
Gracie Mansion.
Gracie Mansion, the mayor's official residence. All right. Who wants a piece of stationery from Gracie Mansion who thinks they know the answer to this question? Yes, sir, right here. Do you have a name? Colin. Stand up, please, Colin. Foreign leaders, visiting heads of state, heads of government, right? Okay. What's the difference between a head of state and a head of government, by the way? A head of state is like a monarch or the president, right? The head of government would be a prime minister, right? So, heads of state, heads of government, right, Colin? Okay, very good. Visiting heads of state, heads of government, right? Okay. Now, there's one more person who's a foreigner who, when he comes to the United States, is protected by the Secret Service. Who might that be? He's technically a head of state, technically. Yes, Colin. Yeah, the Pope. Very good. Very good. Okay, now, we're almost done. We're almost done. There are two more people who are in the United States protected by the Secret Service. Now, of course, there can be additional protectees if the President or the Secretary of Homeland Security directs that they be protected, but there are two more people in the U.S. government who always get Secret Service protection. You know who that might be? Might one of them have been somebody who was standing in this room? The Secretary of Homeland Security, right? Because the Secret Service is part of DHS. The Secretary of Homeland Security gets Secret Service protection. Who is the other cabinet officer? By the way, the Secret Service before DHS was created was in the what? No. Andrew, where was Secret Service before? Treasury, right. So what other cabinet official? Secretary of the Treasury, right. When he gave up the Secret Service to DHS, he says, you can take the Secret Service, but please keep my protection. Right. So, Colin, you got us to the end zone. Very good. Thank you. Give Colin a hand. Okay. Okay. Now, winding down, this does have an end. Winding down, the other missions of DHS, the Coast Guard, the United States Coast Guard. The Coast Guard, in my humble opinion, is the coolest military service. He doesn't believe me. This gentleman right here doesn't believe me. Okay. Tell me your name. Sean. Okay. Here's one of the reasons why the Coast Guard is the coolest service. We've got these new cutters here. Congress is rebuilding the Coast Guard, national security cutters, fast response cutters, offshore patrol cutters that yours truly helped get funded by Congress. So it was the oldest fleet of vessels in the world. Now it is one of the newest. with a domestic maritime security counter-drug mission. Here's the real reason why this is the coolest service, okay? This is a master helmsman on one of our national security cutters. She is the pilot of one of our national security cutters, a multi-million-dollar, tell me your name again? Sean. She is 19 years old. 19 years old. She is about 2 years older than you are, okay? All right? She is 4 years older than you are. You could be a pilot of a national security cutter in 4 years if you're as good as she is, okay? 19 years old, she's a pilot of a national security cutter. 2 years out of high school, okay? Did I impress you? Did I impress you? Okay, I impressed. Now here's another reason why you should be impressed, okay? This is the Juniper. This is a buoy tender. You know what a buoy tender does, Sean? You know what a buoy tender does? It literally tends buoys. It takes buoys and pulls them out of the water. This is the dirty job in the Coast Guard, okay? It takes buoys, pulls them out of the water, and literally scrapes the barnacle and the bilge off. Really nasty stuff. Some of it is living, it's critters, and then then they put them back in the water with that big heavy crane. But somebody in the Coast Guard's got to scrape that off. It's really dirty, dirty work. And the Juniper, last summer, had as part of its crew everybody here see this young man right here saluting? Can you see that? That is J. Charles Johnson, Jr., an ensign in the United States Coast Guard, saluting his dad as his dad leaves the vessel. So J. Charles Johnson, Jr. got to spend a summer on a buoy tender scraping barnacle and bilge. No favoritism for the Secretary's son. But anyway, the Coast Guard is the coolest service. Take my word for it. Okay, FEMA, we talked about FEMA. Anybody know I Spy? Who there can spot the former president in that slide? Okay. One day, I was in Arkansas on tornado relief, and he wants to hang out with me. I said, fine, great. Then the Federal Protection Service, which you see at federal buildings, and the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. I didn't cover that. Now, when you're a cabinet officer, you get to do all kinds of fun things once in a while. I had my own plane, Coast Guard 1, a G5, a Gulfstream 5, flies 45,000 feet. I could get out to California and back by dinner time. I had my own plane, but there are lots of interesting things you do when you're Secretary of Homeland Security. Super Bowl security, responsible for, have I impressed you yet? Okay, all right. Super Bowl security. Meeting with the boss. Meeting with the boss again. Meeting with the boss in the Situation Room. Meeting with the boss in the Situation Room on weekends in casual wear. Meeting with the boss in the Roosevelt Room at the White House. Flying on Air Force One with the boss on road trips. Testifying before Congress. This was the least fun job. 26 times in 3 years. 26 times in 3 years I had to testify before those people, before various different committees. Commencement speeches, like this one at the Coast Guard Academy, honoring our fallen heroes, those killed in the line of duty who are in the Department of Homeland Security somewhere, like the husband of this woman here, a Border Patrol agent killed in the line of duty. Disaster relief, disaster recovery, like in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Meeting with the workforce. Not only the humans, but also the canines. By the way, a dog's nose is better than any technology to sniff out explosives. I guarantee it. A canine's nose is better than any technology we can invest in. Getting the word out, appearing on various news shows, like Stephanopoulos and Rachel Maddow. I get to perform marriages. I got to perform marriages. How cool is that? And last but not least, 5 first pitches. Not one strike. Bill de Blasio told me the first time I threw out a first pitch, whatever you do, don't throw it in the dirt. You throw it in the dirt, they're going to boo you, especially if it's at a Mets game, because Mets fans have a lot of unresolved anger. They're going to boo you. They're going to boo you because you're a public servant, but they're going to boo you if you throw it in the dirt. So that messed with my head. So every single time I threw it in the dirt, every single time. I had a much better form than that when I was younger. This is our mission statement, which I issued. It is still on the website. It is at every single DHS headquarters around the world, and I think it works pretty well. Now, last but not least, I'm going to give away the rest of these sheets of paper here. Okay, last but not least. Andrew, you think, you'll probably be good at this too, right? Okay, now, it gets progressively harder. Progressively harder. So I'm not giving out pieces of paper for the first couple. But let's see how smart Regis High School is. Okay? How worldly you are. Whether you get around, whether you read, watch TV. Okay. Guess the world leader. First, Barack Obama. All right. Come on, speak up. Okay. Okay, now we start to get a little harder. A little harder. Let me see if, should I give out my first piece of paper here? No, not just yet. Okay. Okay, now we start to get a little harder. Gabe, let's see. What do we got here? What do we got? What stationery is that?
The United States Senate.
United States Senate. Okay. Who wants a piece of United States Senate stationery? From the desk of Senator Patrick J. Leahy of Vermont. I heard a voice here. Tell me your name. Okay, there you go. All right. All right, now we get a little harder. We get a little harder. All right. Justin Trudeau. All right. Justin Trudeau. Okay. Now we delve into, this one's still kind of hard, but not too hard. Come on. Who knows? Young man with the tie. Oh, my goodness. Enrique Peña Nieto. Oh, my goodness. Tell me your name. Vincent. Okay, Vincent, I was saving this for the very end, but you jumped right in there. Tell me your name. Vincent? Vincent. All right, Vincent. I'm going to give you this piece of stationery here. Vincent, what does it say? What does this say? This is my among my coolest, all right? Vincent, what does that say?
The White House.
Ooh. Okay. All right. Okay. Vincent had it right. President Enrique Peña Nieto. Vincent, how did you know that? All right. Theresa May. What is Theresa May? Tell me your name. Aiden? All right, Aiden. Very good. Very good. I owe you one, Aiden. Okay? Gabe's going to take care of you. Okay. Don't tell me you know this one. You know this one? All right. You're keeping track, right? I ran out of paper. Okay. Tell me your name. Trevor. Trevor, who is that? Malcolm Turnbull, who is what? Prime Minister of Australia. Very good. Oh, my goodness. This team, this group is batting 1,000. I will tell you, I have given this test to a number of schools. I've never seen anything this impressive. Okay. Oh, I saw this hand go up first. Yes, tell me your name. John. Yes, Boris Johnson. What is Boris Johnson's position in the world? Right, Secretary of State of the United Kingdom. Very good. Very good. What is your name? John. Gabe, you keeping track, right? Okay, we got it. We owe John one. Okay. I'm giving you the whole pad if you get this one. Yes. Tell me your name. Tell me your name. Luke? Yeah. Okay, you get the Smart Aleck Award. Okay, all right. Okay. By the way, you know, I was at a train station the other day, and this guy looked at me and he said, does anybody ever tell you look just like Jay Johnson? That is Angelino Alfano, the foreign minister of Italy. Okay, now, if anybody gets the next one, I'll be impressed. It might help you if you knew the flag, right? Yes. Tell me your name. The Prime Minister of Argentina. Not quite, but nice try, nice try. Okay, all right. Anybody want to guess that one? Let's try the adults. Any adults in here? Are the adults any smarter than the students? Let's see. Yes, sir. What's that? Is that the foreign minister? No. That is the president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez. Okay. Now, here's one. This is a bit of a curveball. She is royalty. Students only, students only. Yes. Aretha Franklin, yes. What is your name? All right. Okay. Last but not least, you cannot see his face. You only see the back of his head. You have to be good. You have to be sharp. You have to be alert. A few of you are going to know this one. So whoever raises the hand first gets the prize. Okay? No. Andrew, come on. All right. No. I'm just kidding. Okay. Now, special bonus quiz. Special bonus quiz. All right. Special bonus quiz. Who can get this one? Let's see. Who can get this one? Yeah, right. 98-mile-an-hour fastball. Okay. All right. One more. Another curveball. Okay. Andrew, here's the last piece of paper I have. Okay? The last one I have. Read what this says.
The
White House Situation Room. Whoa. Who wants to bring this home tonight? Let's see. Okay. Come on. Yes. No, no. Who's got this? Who's got this? Got to be a student. Got to be a student. Come on, somebody. One of the most recognized persons in the United States. Come on. Don't you all watch TV? No. Yes. Paris Hilton? Paris Hilton. Doesn't anybody want this piece of paper? Yes. Claire Danes. All right, there you go. Claire Danes. All right. Okay. All right. All right, now it's your turn. Okay. Questions, discussions, objections, comments, opinions. Who would like to go first? You know, in the Coast Guard, they have a rule. You cannot leave until 2 people ask questions. At least 2 people. Okay. Yes, sir, right here. Come over here. You gotta step up here to the mic so your classmates can hear you.
Hello? Hi.
Hi. What's your name?
My name is Brian.
Bud. Okay, everybody here knows you but me, sorry.
And I'm a senior.
Senior, okay.
Now,
What are you doing next?
after
High school?
hopefully college.
Hopefully college, okay, all right, good. You're on the right track, okay, good.
Recently, Turkey has taken to fighting Kurdish insurgents on its border.
Yes.
Now, Turkey, as a NATO ally of the United States, has the United States' military and logistical support, but Kurdish insurgents are also involved in the role of fighting ISIS in Iraq and Syria. So how does the United States, with such disparate interests, how does the United States and the Department of Homeland Security in particular react and deal with such, not conflicts of interest, I suppose, but such different parties?
Excellent question that has essentially no good answer, okay? Excellent question. So, Bud, right? So you've highlighted a real complication in the Middle East. Turkey is a vital, critical NATO ally. We have military presence there. It's the crossroads of the globe, frankly, between the Far East, the Middle East, Western Europe. They're a NATO partner. They have a refugee crisis themselves. They're on the border with Syria. And in Syria, we have in our counterterrorism effort, no effective fighting force. There's no U.S. large-scale fighting force. So we have to depend on others on the ground. We cannot depend on the Syrian regime itself. And so among the more effective ground forces in Turkey have been the Kurds, various Kurdish forces. The problem with that is the Turks don't like the Kurds. And so the closer you cozy up to the Kurdish forces, the more alienated the Turks become. And the closer you cozy up to the Turks, the more alienated the Kurds become. Then you've got the Russians, you've got the Syrians, you've got ISIS, you've got various other terrorist groups out there, you've got the local insurgency, some of which are very radicalized and include terrorist forces. So we try to work several sides of this street and steer the right middle ground. That's the best answer I can give you. Okay. Yes, sir. Here we go. Okay, this is a good idea.
Hi. Okay. My name is Trevor, like I said earlier. I was just wondering, given your experience in the executive branch and given concerns about civilian death counts and civil liberties, whether you support pretty wholeheartedly the expansion of the drone program under President Obama and President Trump, or whether you think there should be more congressional oversight and some regulatory checking in on that.
Good question. Very good question. So, drone strikes. The question was about drone strikes. before I was Secretary of Homeland Security, I was the General Counsel of the Department of Defense, the senior lawyer for the Department of Defense. One of my responsibilities included giving the legal sign-off for drone strikes. Drone strikes make a lot of people uncomfortable. The reality, however, is that through targeted legal killing, that's what I prefer to call it, we more effectively take the fight to our enemy, we more effectively target our enemy while minimizing collateral damage, versus more traditional warfare where we would drop a bomb on an entire city block and kill a lot of women and children. Now, with our current capability, I can target somebody on one side of the street and somebody on the other side of the street is unscratched, assuming you get the right person. And so drones are part of armed conflict and, in my judgment, should not be subject to any greater congressional scrutiny than any other weapon in our arsenal. It's more precise than a lot of our other weapons. What makes people uncomfortable about drones is that the pilot is in some remote area on the other side of the planet. So the pilot is not putting himself in harm's way, unlike fighter jets, unlike armed conflict on the ground. And some people are concerned that drone strikes could become a substitute for law enforcement, criminal justice, bringing people to justice. And that's a concern of mine, too. And so if we took out a U.S. citizen who was a member of Al-Qaeda, Anwar al-Awlaki, one of our conditions was that the person had to be somebody beyond the reach of our criminal justice system, where capture is not feasible. We should worry, we should be concerned about overuse of drones. But I will tell you that in the 4 years when I was signing off on these, we made our homeland safer through the use of targeted lethal force by taking out a lot of terrorists who were focused on exporting terrorism to our homeland and in the middle of plotting to do so. But anyway, good question. Yes, sir, right here. Where's the mic? There you go.
Hi there. My name is Brady. I guess the question I had ties on with Trevor's a bit, in the sense that if you have a drone strike or U.S. intervention in a country abroad and you're taking military action there, it might breed some local resentment against the United States. How would you guys work to manage and balance the U.S. security needs versus American resentment that you guys might generate?
Well, anytime we employ lethal force overseas, particularly in an area that is not an active combat zone, you have to always be concerned about, are you doing more harm than good? Anytime there is an unintended death, collateral damage, collateral consequences, you have to be worried that you're doing more to engender the enemy, to inspire the enemy, to energize the enemy, than you are to degrade the enemy. And it was John Allen, General John Allen, who told me that the goal of our counterterrorism, counterinsurgency efforts must be to take out the enemy faster than they can recruit. If they're recruiting faster than you can take them out, you're fighting a losing battle. And you have to ask yourself, am I going about this the right way? So there is definitely that balance, that mix. Okay, next question. And then I got a few more minutes. Gentleman right here.
Hi, my name is Gabriel. What does Homeland Security, what is their policy when it comes to hacker groups that tend to act in the best interest of people, such as Anonymous?
Such as who?
Anonymous?
Anonymous. Well, you ever been attacked by Anonymous? I assure you that they would not be acting in your best interest if you did so. Some of us in government have been targeted by groups like Anonymous, and it's not a pretty thing. The issue, look, we are a nation of laws, We are a nation of rules. And I don't agree that, I certainly agree that civil disobedience can be in the public interest as long as those who engage in it are prepared to accept the consequences. When Martin Luther King engaged in civil disobedience, violated a local zoning ordinance or a local ordinance or even a court order, he was prepared to accept the consequences. I don't agree with someone who breaks our laws, violates someone's privacy because of some misguided sense of what's in the public interest. I don't agree that someone should steal classified information, break our laws because of some misguided sense of public interest if they're not prepared to accept the consequences. Sorry.
Regarding the field, regarding the field of like cybersecurity, so like obviously if you want to be like a lawyer, you go to law school. If you want to be a police officer, you go to like a police academy.
Right.
But like, how do you get involved in like the field of cybersecurity for like service?
Good question, and there are undergraduate schools and graduate schools that have cybersecurity programs specifically. Georgia Tech comes to mind. There are a number of schools now that, through Homeland Security grants, for example, if they're not cut in the budget, fund the education for cybersecurity. I also believe that because cybersecurity is a growth area in the U.S. government, assuming we have the billets and the budget for it, it's a terrific opportunity to learn cybersecurity, working in Homeland Security, working in the U.S. military, working in our intelligence community, and then you go to Citigroup or J.P. Morgan Chase and make six figures. Okay? All right. I got time for one more question. Who has not had an opportunity to speak yet? Let's see. This gentleman over here with the tie. Oh, okay. Two more questions. Okay. I called on both of you. It's always that last question that gets me. Okay. It's always that last question that I wish I hadn't solicited. Okay. Tell us your name.
Raphael. I'm a sophomore.
Raphael. You're a senior.
No, sophomore.
Sophomore.
I wish.
What are you doing next? Hoping to get to be a junior, right?
Yeah, hopefully passing to next year.
Okay.
So one of the big things that you talked about as far as counterterrorism is how the shift has happened from international threats to they're now trying to recruit domestic U.S. citizens to
Correct.
make these attacks.
Right.
And one of the ways that they do that is through social media, like Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, and they spread propaganda through those platforms. What do you think the U.S. government, specifically the Department of Homeland Security, can do to combat social media's impacts in that sector?
That's a good question, and we spent a lot of time in the last administration trying to deal with this issue. So one of the ways to do that is raise awareness among internet service providers about terrorist content on their platforms, which almost always violates their own terms of service, and getting them to take it down. Another is within the communities that I talked about in my presentation, amplifying the counter message. What's the counter message to all of this? What's the more positive message? What's the positive, peaceful message about what Islam is all about? Islam is about peace. And so amplifying those two messages. In terms of any efforts at censorship by the government itself, I don't believe that's a security issue. Except for pure terrorist content, like how to build a bomb in your mother's kitchen. Because of the First Amendment, I don't believe the government should be involved in censorship. Other governments around the world do that. But that's not a role for our security agencies in the U.S. government. Okay, one more question right here.
My name is Jack.
Jack. Hello, Jack.
Besides interfering in their missile tests, how can the United States retaliate against North Korea using cyber attacks in a country that is so scarcely connected to the internet?
That's a good question. And you should assume, Jack, that the U.S. government has lots of different capabilities, seen and unseen, okay, to deal with worldwide adversaries. How much more can I say? Okay? All right. So, but Jack, good question. There's the military response. But with the military response, it's very easy to start a war. It's actually pretty easy to start a war. You just give an order to somebody, launch a missile. What's more difficult is the second, third, fourth order effects. What's step 2? What's step 3? What's step 4? What am I going to do after we take out that regime, that specific regime? It's what General Colin Powell calls the pottery barn rule. You break it, you own it. So what are we going to do in that country after we take out a specific leader? And too often, governments stumble into a war without thinking about those second, third, fourth order effects. Okay. I have 3 things I want to leave you with. 3 things. One is what I said earlier. 80% of life is raising your hand. You don't get anywhere unless you raise your hand. Those of you with those pieces of paper got them because you raised your hand. That's number 1. Number 2, it is entirely possible when you're a public servant, when you're a cabinet officer, when you're a senior member of our government, to enforce the law, administer the law, and do so in a humane and fair way that takes account of individual people's lives and their stories, some of which I shared with you today. Those were stories that I encountered when I was in office. We can and we should enforce and administer our laws and our policies in a fair, humane way, consistent with our values as Americans. That's number 2. Number 3, I encourage all of you to think about, for at least part of your careers as adults, serving your country, or your state, or your community, your city. You don't have to go into the United States military necessarily, though some of you in this room may, and I would encourage you to do so. But there are a number of ways in which you guys can serve your country, your community, and the people around you. I will tell you that I've been a lawyer for 35 years. 2/3 of that time has been as a private corporate lawyer. The other third has been in public office. And my public service has by far been the most gratifying time I've had in office. Though, when I was a cabinet officer, leading an organization of 230,000 people with the responsibility to protect the homeland, I probably made less money than Jimmy here, who's a young associate of Paul Weiss. But it was by far the most gratifying time I've had in my professional life. So I encourage all of you to think about a career, or at least a time, serving your community, serving the public. Thanks a lot, everybody.